Hello again and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com, and today I'm going to talk about the TOEFL Essentials test. I'm going to describe the sections of the test and the types of questions you might get on test day. First up, I want to draw your attention to the fact that this has the same 4 sections as the TOEFL IBT: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. In addition, it contains an unscored personal statement at the end of the test, and I'll talk about that later in the video. I should also mention here that the length of each section is different every time you take the test, and the number of questions you get is also different. Don't be surprised if you get more questions than what I say here. That's totally normal and nothing to be worried about. As usual, though, I want to suggest that you check out the official ETS material. Everything I've learned about this test, I've learned from ETS, of course. So either before or after you watch this video, check out the 3 free practice tests on the ETS website. I'll put a link to those in the video description. They're very, very useful, and you certainly need to take them if you're preparing for the Essentials test. Anyways, let's get started by talking about the listening part of the test. The first type of question I got when I took the practice test was the choose the best response type. I got 10 of these questions. In this type of question, you listen to a statement that someone on campus is giving, like a fellow student or a worker or a professor, and you have to pick the best response. You're given 4 possible choices. You click on the best one. So like in this case, the man might say, when should I hand in my history assignment? And you have to pick before the end of the day. These little dialogues mostly seem to be about campus situations. Like when I took the practice test, one of them was a student who was looking for a book in the library, and another one was setting some appointment for a social event. So they're very common kind of campus things. The statements all seem to be quite short, like 1 sentence mostly. That seems to be normal for this section. Next up, I got the listen to a conversation type question. I got 4 separate conversations, and each conversation had 2 questions. The conversations were very short, just 3 or 4 lines, maybe a minute and a half in total. And in this case, they weren't strictly about campus situations, but were just about regular life situations. So I think in the practice tests, one of them was about checking in at a hotel, and another one was about going to a computer repair shop. Again, the questions are all multiple choice. You pick from 4 options. Broadly speaking, I noticed 4 main styles of questions. First up, and the most common, are the factual information questions. These are where you have to correctly identify a specific detail that was mentioned in the conversation. Next up were implication questions, or you might call these inference questions. This is when the test says something like, what is suggested when the man says such and such? So you have to make a logical guess about what he is suggesting or what he means. It's not directly stated. Also very common are summary questions. These ones are phrased something like, what is the main subject of this conversation? Or what are they mainly talking about? And you pick the answer from 4 choices. Lastly, I did notice some prediction questions. Something like, what will the man likely do after the conversation is finished? Or what will the woman do next? These are generally the second of the two questions for the conversations. Next up, I got the listen to an announcement style question. I got two separate announcements, and each one had two questions. Here, you're listening to one person speak at some location on a university campus. So it might be a classroom, or it might be a certain workshop, or maybe it's someone speaking at a social event, something like that. The question styles are quite similar to the previous section, but in this one, they did have a lot of stuff like identify the speaker. So the question says something like, who most likely is the speaker? And you'll have to pick, is he a professor? Is he a student? Is he a librarian? Is he an administrative worker? Something like that. You'll also get summary questions like before. What is the main topic of the announcement? Factual information questions and prediction questions, just like before. Next up is the most challenging part of the listening section, where you're listening to an academic talk. Generally, these are in a class. So it'll say, listen to a talk in a history class. Listen to a talk in a biology class. Some of them, they call it a podcast instead of a class. It's pretty much the same, but I guess ETS is trying to sound a little more modern and trendy, so they're calling it a podcast. On the practice tests, I got 2 of these, and each one had 4 questions. They're very similar to the academic lectures in the TOEFL IBT, so you might want to prepare using some of those. However, I should mention that they are much shorter than those long TOEFL IBT lectures. They all seem to be maybe 2 minutes long, something like that. The question styles that I noticed were summary, just like before, and I noticed some purpose questions. So it'll say something like, why did the professor mention such and such a detail? And you have to kind of explain what their reason for that was. Again, it's multiple choice out of 4. Again, there's factual information questions and there's inference questions, just like before. Next up on the test is the reading section. First up in the reading section is an interesting question style. It's a game of like synonyms, basically. So as you can see, you're given a word, in this case, review, and you have to pick the word that is closest in meaning. In this case, it would be analyze, and you drag it up to the box. I got 10 of these. You might get more. There is something interesting I should mention about this. I believe this type of question does not affect your overall TOEFL Essentials score. This part is reported separately in a section called, I think, just vocabulary awareness or something like that, and it's reported as a percentile score. Now, I don't know how closely the universities are going to look at these percentile scores. They might mainly focus on your overall TOEFL Essentials score, but this is something you should definitely try your best on. It's something I'm going to keep an eye on when I talk to students and I talk to universities as we move forward with this test. After that, we get back to basic reading. First up is the general reading section, where you read some stuff related to daily life. On the practice tests, I got 3 of these things. Each one had 2, 3, or 4 questions. Now, this is a lot like the TOEIC test, if you're familiar with that one. You're going to read like an advertisement, or maybe a coupon, or an email, or a short like newspaper article or some announcement or maybe a product receipt. Just those general sort of things you read in your everyday life. And then you're going to answer some questions about it. The question styles are, well, this is what I noticed. First of all, identify the writer. So if you're reading an email, you have to kind of figure out who most likely wrote this email. Maybe it's a customer. Maybe it's a student. Maybe it's, I don't know, a newspaper critic. Something like that. It's a multiple choice. You have to correctly identify what kind of person wrote the thing. There's also factual questions, just like I mentioned in the listening section, where you have to pick up on some detail that is specifically mentioned there. There's also negative factual questions, where you have to pick up a detail that is specifically not mentioned in the reading, just like the TOEFL IBT. There's vocabulary questions, where you have to pick a synonym for a word. So it might say, the word analyze in the email is closest in meaning to, and then you pick from 4 choices. And once again, there are inference questions in this section, where you have to make educated guesses based on the facts that are actually in the reading. Next up is the academic reading table question. This one's very new. I haven't seen anything like this on a test before. On the practice set, I got one of these with 4 questions. It seems to work like this. You're given a chart with 3 different sections. And overall, it's describing a single thing. They seem to like maybe animals or plants, or maybe even like concepts. But each section has its own heading. So in this case, it's talking about a white snail. It talks about the characteristics of it. It talks about the adaptations of it, and it gives an interesting note. The questions in this case are multiple choice, but the options are always true, false, or not stated. So you have to read and understand the chart and answer these questions. Lastly is the most challenging part of the reading section, which is the academic reading passage. On the practice tests, I got one of these with 6 questions. Now these are very, very similar to the academic articles on the TOEFL IBT, but they are shorter. In this case, they seem to be 2 or 3 paragraphs long, but hey, maybe you might get one even longer than that, I'm not sure. The sample you see here on the screen is just something I made for the TOEFL IBT, and I chopped off the bottom part, so it might look something like this. It's hard. Now, the question styles are just like on the TOEFL IBT. I'm not going to describe all of them, but you can get any old material for the TOEFL IBT and learn about what they are. The only styles that don't seem to come up are the big ones, the fill in a chart style and the summary style. I think those are just too big to include on the essentials test, so you probably won't have to worry about those. But again, this is challenging, so make sure you're doing all your academic reading. And fortunately, there are a ton of IBT readings you can use to practice and prepare for this section. Moving along to my favorite part of the test, which is the writing section of the test. Before I go on, I will mention that I plan to make some separate writing videos in the weeks ahead. So if you check the channel again, you can find some sample writing questions, maybe some templates and answers. And once those are done, I'll link to them in the video description as well. First up, though, there's another one of these curiously strange questions. It's called the Build a Sentence question, and I got 15 of them on the test. In this part, you're given a question, and you have to build the response by clicking and dragging the words in the right order. Now, this one on the screen is pretty easy, and you're probably going to get something easy like that at the beginning, but they will get harder as it goes on. Also, this is another one where you're getting the special score. You're getting a score that's not going to be part of your overall TOEFL Essentials score. So, again, do your best, but even if you mess this up, it's not going to bring down your overall TOEFL Essentials score. Just keep that in mind. Now we get to the real heavy-duty writing. First up, writing an email. You might get one of these on the test, or you might not get any of them. In any case, if you do get one, you have 7 minutes to speak. Here's how it works. On the left-hand side of the screen, it kind of describes a situation that you experienced. So in this case, it says you recently saw an advertisement for a sightseeing tour of New York City. And it's going to mention some specific details of the situation. So in this case, it mentions specifically that you saw the cost of the tour and you also saw the attractions the tour stops at. Now, you have to write an email to the tour company. And it's going to tell you 3 things that you need to do in that email. And so I won't mention them here, but you can pause the video and read them. You only have 7 minutes to write, so this is going to be pretty short, I think. My guess would be that this might come out to like 100 words, and there is a word counter on the screen. I'm going to make up some samples. I'll see how it feels, and I'll see how much I can come up with in 7 minutes. But in any case, make sure you do these 3 things in your answer. That's critically important. But also, make sure you mention somehow the 2 things, the 2 specific details. You're being told those for a reason, so you should probably mention them in your email. So in this case, you're going to say, dear sir, I recently saw a advertisement for a tour. I really liked the price of the tour, which I thought was very appealing. And I'm also excited because I see that it stops at the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building. And then maybe you'll get into your questions. I also want to stress at this point that you're going to be scored by a human and some software, the e-rater. So the content is very important, but also your grammatical correctness is important and the quality of your vocabulary. So it's both content and technical aspects. Make sure you study your grammar. Next up is the describe a photo question. You're going to get maybe one of these on the test, I think. This is kind of unique. Every bloody English test has a describe a photo question. This is not new. But ETS is not just saying describe a photo, it's saying pretend that you posted this photo on social media and they want you to describe the photo for your social media friends. Again, maybe this is ETS trying a little bit too hard to be trendy and modern, but I like it. It's a good touch. Specifically, it says write complete sentences. Yeah, you darn well better write complete sentences. And it also says, and this is fun, write as much as you can. So, don't feel limited. It's 7 minutes. I'm thinking maybe 100 words, maybe 120. There is a word counter displayed. So experiment a bit as you practice. Kind of do some role playing. You don't just have to say, I'm on a bus, I'm wearing a hat, there are people beside me. You can say, the bus was crowded and I was on the bus for 10 hours and I thought I would never get off. But the man sitting beside me, you can kind of get into the spirit of the thing. You're being judged again, both on your grammar and your content, your language use, all that great stuff. Moving along, the last question, once again, is the most difficult one, and I'm pretty sure you're guaranteed to get one of these on the test. It's kind of complicated, so pay attention. On the left-hand side of the screen, you get the instructions. It's going to explain something like your professor is teaching a class on business, biology, history, sociology, whatever. You have to write a post, like an internet post. It's a message board, right? Again, ETS, trying to be modern. Responding to a question. And there's specific instructions in your post. Express and support your personal opinion, that's obvious, but also make a contribution to the discussion. I'm going to get to that in a minute. So Dr. Jones talks a little bit about this. He introduces the topic. He says advertising is a big part of everyone's life and children get advertisements. And then there's the main question. Should businesses be prohibited from advertising products during television programs that are mostly viewed by children under the age of 10? So your job is to respond to this question. But you can see here that 2 other students have expressed their opinions. Sophie gives her opinion, and then Justin gives his opinion. So in your response, you should not only answer the question, but you should respond to Sophie and Justin. So you could say something like, Sophie, I like your point about how kids aren't very smart, but it's possible that they can become smarter if they see some advertisements. Moreover, I think you're totally wrong when you say that commercials promote a lot of useless junk. Whatever. You continue from that point. And then maybe give a sentence or 2 responding to the stuff that Justin says specifically. After that, you can specifically express your personal opinion, which is totally unique from the details that Sophie and Justin give. This is 10 minutes, so you have time to write, maybe 130, 150 words. We'll see as we practice this. So I think you probably have time for 2 short paragraphs. 1 paragraph where you make a contribution to the discussion, and another paragraph where you specifically express your personal opinion. Again, content matters, vocabulary matters, sentence structure matters, grammar matters. This is all very important, so really, really prepare for this as much as you can. Last but not least is the speaking section of the test. First up is the read aloud section. On the practice test, I got one of these with 6 different questions. This is unique. How it works is that you are having a conversation with a student. He asks you a question. He might say, "Oh, hey, I see that you are really anxious about something. What's going on?" And then your response is displayed on the screen, and you have to read it. You see what I mean? You're not coming up with the response. The response is given to you. You just have to read what you're showing on the screen. Of course, that sounds very easy, but you're being judged based on your pronunciation, your intonation, the way you deliver vowels and consonants and your pauses and your repetitions, and whether or not you can just read properly, I guess. And you're being judged by a human rater, and you're being judged by a software program called SpeechRater. So make sure you practice your spoken English before you take the test. Next up is something quite similar. It's the listen and repeat section. On the practice test, I got one of these with 8 questions. In this case, you are listening to someone speaking on a university campus, and you have to repeat what they said. So you don't get to read it this time. You just actually have to remember what they said, and then you have to say it back. That's a lot more challenging. The goal is to repeat it back as accurately as possible without changing anything. And, of course, with a good accent and good pronunciation and intonation, all those fine things. I think, you're allowed to make a few little changes because no one's memory is perfect, but this will take practice. And fortunately, this is something you can easily practice, right? You can listen to things on YouTube and try to repeat them. Next up is the interview task. This one's, again, the most difficult part because you have to come up with your own speaking stuff. On the practice test, I got one of these with 5 questions. This is an interview with, with a computer character. You're going to see a man or a woman on the screen, and they're going to be playing the part of somebody at a university, like a professor or an administrator, maybe somebody who works in a bookstore or a library, and they're going to be asking you questions. And you respond. You get either 45 seconds or 1 minute for your response. And some of these are very kind of specific to you, like as a student. So it might be something like, tell me about your experience studying in another country. But sometimes they're just more broad. Like they'll say, what do you think are the benefits of studying in another country? So you can maybe recognize that's very similar to a TOEFL IBT independent speaking question. That's the end of the test. That's the end of the stuff that's graded, those 4 sections. That'll take you about an hour and a half to do. But there's one more thing, which is the personal statement. There's 2 questions. It takes about 2 minutes to do each one. The first question is always the same for everyone who takes the test. What would you like to tell people about yourself? You should prepare this in advance. You can speak for 2 minutes in total. It's going to look like this, and see the point where it says, remember, you can choose retry 1 time. So if you speak and you don't like it, you can try again once. But just remember, if you do try again, it's going to force you to send your second attempt. Like once you click retry, the first one is gone forever. You can't use it. That's my understanding. The second question in this one, I have no idea. It's going to be different each time. But, I think you can probably prepare with some of those boring old standard questions like, tell me a time you overcame adversity or some junk like that. As I said, this part of the test is not scored, but the university you're applying to will always have access to it. Now, again, that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. I hope the universities look at these things, but, they might not. So, we'll see how it turns out. Try your best. My understanding is if you're sure the university isn't going to look at this, I think you're permitted to just submit nothing. I think you can skip it. But obviously that's probably a dumb idea. Just try something. All right, I am going to leave it at that. That's everything I know about the TOEFL Essentials test so far. But I'm going to study this as much as I can in the days ahead. So if you have any questions about it, just leave a comment down below. I'll respond as quickly as I can. And as I said, come back in a week or 2 and I should have some writing section videos. I'll tell you how to write a good email. I'll tell you how to describe a picture and even how to do that very difficult academic writing one. All right, take care, guys. I love you very much, and I will see you real soon. Bye-bye.